Okay, everyone, welcome to The Body Keeps the Score, Brain, Mind, and Body, and the Healing of Trauma by Bessel van der Kolk, MD, Part 1.
One does not have to be a combat soldier or visit a refugee camp in Syria or the Congo to encounter trauma. Trauma happens to us, our friends, our families, and our neighbors. Research by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has shown that 1 in 5 Americans was sexually molested as a child. 1 in 4 was beaten by a parent to the point of a mark being left on their body, and 1 in 3 couples engage in physical violence. A quarter of us grew up with alcoholic relatives, and 1 out of 8 witnessed their mother being beaten or hit. As human beings, we belong to an extremely resilient species. Since time immemorial, we have rebounded from our rather relentless wars, countless disasters, both natural and man-made, and the violence and betrayal in our own lives. But traumatic experiences do leave traces, whether on a large scale, on our histories and cultures, or close to home, on our families, with dark secrets being imperceptibly passed down through generations.
Alrighty, that concludes Part 1 of the book study. Wow. So, does anyone have any comments on what we just read, on what we just listened to? I thought it was all very profound. I have some stuff to say, but I want to see if other folks want to chime in.
Yeah, I have a quick comment just about the incident where the white male in Vietnam experienced a traumatic event in I guess it was rice fields in Vietnam, and his comrades were murdered, killed at war. Um, their white supremacist program, which was the Vietnam War. They were invading this country and they were killed. And then he went on his traumatic experience led to him to cause more trauma by killing children, raping women, and murdering a farmer. So it's just, and those sort of things happen today in the place known as the Middle East. So it's just a continued cycle of this trauma. Trauma is a very, very, it's a behemoth of destruction.
Yeah, I thought that part was interesting because it was like, obviously, yeah, he experienced trauma, but also there's just like a part of him being like psychopathic and just not caring about certain people's lives or not viewing certain people as valuable. So I thought that part was very interesting. I really had like no sympathy towards him to be like, but and I thought it was interesting that like at one point they say he wants to be able to like put Vietnam behind him because like that's a whole country that experienced a lot of atrocities, and the Vietnamese people can't put it behind them. They have to exist in those places forever. And I think like one of the things that it made me think about when I read that part was about kind of like collective healing, because I remember reading a book about how a lot of people who go out to war, like a lot of American people who go to other countries to war, are like less able to adjust because when you're in, like, let's say Vietnam, everyone is collectively going through that trauma in that country. So you're able to talk about it and kind of like work through it together because you're all experiencing it. But when you're coming from Vietnam to America, where everyone's trying to pretend like it's not happening, it makes it a lot harder. So I think it was interesting. And I hope that they go into like, because I feel like a lot of it is just like having you be able to adjust. Like it was about getting the kids to be able to, the kids who were suicidal to be able to like go to the store and stuff like that. But I feel like at some point we have to like switch to like adjusting our society to the fact that it's all traumatizing, and like adjusting the conversations that we have as a society. So those were my thoughts right now.
Thank you for that, Ash. Yeah, I think this is a really profound section because war is mentioned, and for those for many of the people in this book club, we understand racism is war. It's a war waged against non-whites, started by white people, white supremacists. So non-whites, especially Black people, are in a constant state of war. Therefore, I suspect every victim of racism and white supremacy to have post-traumatic stress syndrome, which is a very common symptom people in war experience. And I myself have been, I myself was diagnosed with PTSD when I was in so-called college. So yeah, this is a very real reality that we are experiencing, and I really appreciated the portion of the text where he says um, the importance of facing trauma, the importance of facing reality, which ties into one of the 17 stops that Dr. Francis Bessel mentions, which is to stop pretending that racism, white supremacy exists. Stop pretending that it's not dominating us, mutilating us, brutalizing us, and all in all, traumatizing us. And also the bit with the imagination, how trauma destroys the imagination, could be a huge um, explanation. Can explain why in my life, especially when I hop on Facebook, a lot of my so-called family members are just not even, it's every victim of racism that I see on Facebook is just some kind of carbon copy of like Sandra mentioned, Cardi B. Like they don't seem to have their own personality or identity. It's all something superficial. And I suspect it's because the symptoms of white supremacy has eroded their imagination, has eroded their potential to be um, people more than ghetto glorifiers, unfortunately. And it reminded me of this experience I had when I was just hanging out in LA with a couple of associates, and we were all just smoking, and I started talking about like trauma, and then the whole room went silent. And keep in mind, I'm in a room full of Black people, so we all should have something to say about, living in South Central and dealing with the constant chaos around us. But he mentions how trauma creates this huge apathetic personality as well, where people just don't care anymore. And in a sense of white supremacy, this is what we're dealing with. Anyone have any comments? Anyone to share?
I like the fact that he said the greatest source of suffering is the lie that we tell ourselves. I feel like in order for people to keep up with themselves, they have to constantly lie to themselves to kind of escape their trauma, um, or to have no emotion or feeling within that trauma, because there's people that, especially serial killers, that they put this whole persona of this is how I'm living. In reality, this is not how they're really living. So because they can't really live that life or touch that life, they kind of get close to it in a certain amount of way. They harm others. So hurt people hurt others. And that's how the functioning of life is, because of, I feel like in this system, because of the hurt these white people felt for whatever reason they felt for of their skin and etc., the trauma that they brought on themselves is projected onto all of us as opposed to others as well. And then we do it to ourselves, and then we do it to each other. So it's our trauma is more deep rooted to the point where when you do have kids, that's just trauma that you're putting on your child. You know, they say, you know, your children could know by your energy, or in order to raise kids, you kind of have to like fix yourself to be the best self of yourself. But that's the person that they're getting. That's the person that you're showing your child who you are. So that's how this cycle system just seems like it's just going to keep going and going if someone doesn't, you know, try to figure out what's the issue.
Yeah, I also had that note down. I really also appreciated the portion where the greatest suffering comes from the lies we tell ourselves. And in system white supremacy, there are millions of lies that victims of racism tell themselves. For example, I'm good. Um, Jesus is gonna take care of it. I'm not affected by racism. I am free. Um, these are just some of the lies that we tell ourselves, which I suspect leads to more suffering because we're not able to deal with reality constructively. We are being mistreated and we are pretending like it's not happening. Therefore, we are not able to change our behavior or even have a clear understanding of okay, how is this world functioning and why does it seem that like everyone who looks like me is much worse off than people who call themselves white.
That
So
remind me of you know how people when one of their family members die to injustice or etc. from, you know, police officers, and then they go to court or they file like a civil suit and then they win all this money. Like, I don't think people understand that they rather give you millions and millions of money than to try and actually change the system. That's just them compensating for a system that they're not going to try to change at all.
exactly. And Ms. Williams, I see you have a hand up.
Um, I guess I had a quick comment. I was always raised to believe, and I always doubted the being told that the chemical brain imbalance, that people that were mentally ill were born like defective with this imbalance. This is what I was taught a lot when I was younger, and I started to feel like when I talked to people as I got older that there's always molestation or like abuse, either like physical abuse in these families of people that are mentally ill most of the time. And then the most common factor is lack of money. So like, even if you don't have a lot of those things, if you live in poverty, I noticed that one of the big things was lack of money. So I think that the reason why they conceal a lot of this is because the way that the system's set up, that it would expose them if they really talked about all of the ways that mental illness happened. So I feel like they kind of skate around it with the religion.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to
One second, I want to get Ms. Williams' hand. I see she has a hand up.
I'm sorry, I didn't see the hand. It was my fault. I was driving a car and I didn't mean to be rude at all. I did not see the thing. I'm so sorry. I can't hear too well. I'm in a tube thing. So I apologize, okay? For the accident. Can't hear well.
Ms. Williams, you have a hand raised.
Okay, I kind of figured from this title that it might be a little emotional when you're looking at trauma, especially when you really didn't understand it. listening to this, and I know this is just the first part, so I'm not sure how I'm gonna handle the rest of it, but the first part is really, it's bringing back memories. For me, I've been married twice, right? My first husband was a Vietnam veteran, and he was like maybe 11 years older than me, right? But I never could understand him. I knew he had been in the Vietnam War, and I just didn't understand. I'm understanding more listening to this, but one of the things that happened to him, he was airborne, right? And he would occasionally talk to me about things, not often, but occasionally. And he actually told me about, by him being airborne, they would have to every night they would have to jump out of planes and go and kill people. And I remember times when he would go to sleep and he would wake up and he would be screaming, and I still didn't even understand what that was about, right? And it wasn't often, but while he was there, I remember him telling me that the group that he was with, every night they had to jump out of planes and go kill people, right? Every night they did this. So what they would do, he and his, I wouldn't say all of his crew, but quite a few of them, they would get high. I don't know exactly what drug they were using, but I assume it was quite powerful, that it gave you the nerve to go and do what you had to do. And each time that they would go out and fight, they always knew they may not be coming back. And that's what that was so profound, is that they did that night after night, never knowing if they were going to come back. And I'm pretty sure some of them didn't come back, so the numbers in the group probably went down. But knowing this now, I can better understand what he went through. But then I had no clue, no understanding, because I didn't know. But the drug addiction was so horrible that even when he got out, now of course he had a life before me, but even when he got out, he never told me they stripped him of all of his military benefits. Never told me that. I only found out about that when he died in a nursing home, not here in Houston, but in Fort Worth. And he died in the nursing home. And when we tried to get him a veteran's funeral, right, that's when it came out that he was dishonorably discharged about an addiction that he did not have before he went into service, but that he acquired while he was in there, trying to cope with having to kill people night after night. So learning that he lost all of his benefits, they wouldn't give him a military funeral. And that was hurting, because that was the first time my daughter found out about that too, because from what I was thinking he was a hero, fighting for his country and whatever, right? But then later, I guess, one thing I know, that if a soldier is released under dishonorable discharge, he knows this. It ain't like he don't know, but I guess he was so embarrassed that they took all his benefits from him, and he didn't have anything. So when he got out, I can see why his addiction was even greater, because he didn't even have the VA to be able to help him. So his drug addiction just continued and continued and continued, and until it just literally took him out. But we were only married for 10 years. And after that, I couldn't deal with him. I would come home sometime and the living room suit is gone. The whole living room suit is gone. I'm trying to figure out what the world. So me still not understanding his addiction, when he would come home, I said, look, you're gonna have to go and give me my furniture. I don't know what you're doing and why you're doing, but go give me my furniture, right? The next day, all my furniture was back. Right? But it just goes to show you the horror that's set up behind war, and what it does to families, right? Now, I remember times when he would have periods of isolation where he just had to get away from me. And I couldn't understand why you always got to go, why you got to go. But he had to go because he never wanted to do the drugs around me. And I didn't understand that. But, and if he would get in a fit of anger, he would always say, well, I got to go, I'll be back. He would leave and go, stay gone for like 3 and 4 days at a time, you know. And then when he would come back, he hires a kite, no money. And it got to the point I just after being in a relationship with him off and on, I'm putting him out thinking maybe that'll make him do better, whatever. But I never understood the addiction. I never understood him using the drugs to cover up what was happening to him while he was in the war. And then when he came home to be rejected, because we all know that when those veterans, Black veterans came back, they were horribly mistreated. They were not treated fairly. So I can understand now better why he had, or he felt that he had to do the drugs even when he got out, because he couldn't deal with, even after going and killing all of these people for his so-called country, that then you take all my benefits from me and leave me destitute. Now, he was able to acquire a livelihood as a licensed electrician, right? And he did work for a company, so he's had good job, but it didn't do him any good because the addiction was so great that the only time I could get money out of him is that I would tell him, I said, okay, now you need to come home and bring the money now, because so we can pay the bills. And every other week he would do that. He could not do it continually. So I got to the point, I said, no, I can't live like this. I just can't. So we finally split for the last time. And, you know, and I kept in contact with him because of my daughter, because I always wanted her to have a relationship with her father. But then later, I'm realizing the addiction is sometimes even ingrained in us, because now my daughter deals with addiction, not the same one as her father, but she deals with addiction. But because I knew of her father's addiction, I would warn her not to do drugs. I warned her over and over. But of course, children do what they want to do. And she just decided that, and probably of her life traumas as well, because sometimes we don't realize things that have happened to our children until they're older. They never open up and tell you anything. So drug addiction can be hereditary too, that to the point that when you do any drug, then it takes you into that cycle of what's already in your bloodstream from your father, because he did drugs for many years. But it's just sad. And it just made me think about that, and how the system is so unjust, even to our war veterans who go and give their lives for their country. And then they come back and realize, what did I do this for? I killed all these people. I risked my life. I got a drug addiction. And now you don't want to take care of me or help me or give me the benefits that you promised me. But it's a system of racism, white supremacy. So it just made me think about all that. And a lot of times I've not really understood it, but listening to this, it really helped me to better understand him. And I forgave him long years ago, so it wasn't that, but it's like now, by hearing this, it helps me to better understand what he really was going through, that he could not explain to me, even as his wife, he just could not explain. But I'm glad that one thing I always did, I always knew that whoever I was married to, even when we divorced, not that you were wanting divorce, but I knew that if it came to the end, that I still wanted to remain friends. So even to the time of his death, we were still friends. And I appreciated that, because I didn't let it make me bitter about what had happened to him and how he was treating me and the family because of his addiction. I just knew that it was better to be a friend from the beginning and end in a friendship. So it just brought back a lot of memories for me. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for sharing, Miss Williams. That was and I suspect he couldn't explain what he was going through because he didn't have the knowledge to say I have been deeply traumatized during the war and this is my escape route, these drugs. But thank you for sharing. It just makes me want to share just symptoms of trauma that I was able to reflect on in hindsight, much after it happened, of course. Um, but I was involved in this experience where a race soldier. For those of you who may not have heard this term before, a race soldier is a person pretending to be a police officer. So I had this experience with this with this race soldier, and it involved a shining bright light and loud knocking sounds, and it happened when I was 13. So and when that experience happened, I didn't chalk it up to much, but a couple of years later, when I would be exposed to bright lights or that sound that sounded like the race soldier knocking, I would experience a lot of anxiety. And it could be like when I was in the shower, it could be just a random headlight when I'm walking down the street. It would take me back to that moment. And this is years down the line. And then eventually I was able to correlate, oh shit, this is a symptom of post-traumatic stress syndrome. I'm literally being triggered by lights and certain sounds, and it's literally taking me back to my 13-year-old self, where I was in that hopeless situation with the race soldier. So that's just one of the many examples of how we can be affected by trauma and how it literally lives in our body, which is why I really appreciate that we're reading this book together and that we're having the courage to discuss um, something as serious as trauma. But that's just one of the many experiences I've had involving trauma and its very, very real symptoms. Anyone have any thing else to share? Any notes they have?
Can I chime in real quick?
Oh, please do.
Yeah, so I just wanted to comment on, some of the outbursts that the soldiers were experiencing due to their trauma, not really understanding why it was happening. And it brought up some memories I had. I work in preschool, and I was working in Bayview's Hunters Point, which has a high amount of gun violence. And so in my classroom, about half of the kids were showing symptoms of toxic stress and PTSD. And I before doing like an observation and investigation as to what was going on, the children, certain specific kids were having outbursts, emotional outbursts, rage outbursts, displaying some of the violence they were experiencing at home and play. And it just goes to show that, regardless if you're a child, an adult, like these trauma it manifests itself in the same way all throughout life. And I think that if we take some more time to understand the things that are going on in our lives, that we'll be able to sorry, I lost my train of thought real quick. I'm doing something. We'll be able to be a more healing society. I know a lot of people who have a lot of anger and rage, and they're not ones to really talk about the things going on, but it's a constant cycle of being upset, not knowing why, and then calming and just collapsing or breaking down. And it's something that I saw in the classroom. But I thought that was a really important parallel, at least in my life. But I had a question. In the very beginning, he brought up bottom up style of like therapy. Does anybody know anything about that?
It's definitely going to be mentioned in the future, but it could be him
Oh, he is?
talking about the therapies involving just talking, therapies involving medication, and also therapies involving attempting to change the brain waves via different technologies. So these are all will be mentioned, and it could be one of those I just mentioned as well. But we will definitely be learning tons about what I just mentioned as we progress through the book.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Um, I was having any comments. Um, does oh, did I interrupt someone just now?
I was gonna add something. Yeah, no, I found it because I've been reading and paying a lot of attention to how trauma works, from personal experience in family, me, but also just seeing the way other people react. And I think the annoying thing sometimes is with these books, it's so centered around whiteness and the way white people function that it's really sometimes hard. Like they call everything irrational, for example, and it's like sometimes I feel like taking away from experiences of people who could I don't know, be like, I guess, understood differently. I just feel like they always try to pigeon, like they always have this idea of normal and then this idea of irrational. And it just, for me, feels like with Black communities, they overimpose that on us. Like they're like, oh yeah. And it's like, nah, like we're also experiencing trauma. And I think these books kind of, for me, it's kind of like they kind of use things like, oh, because other men go to war, your reaction is I don't know, I just feel like they use these studies as like the base of it, and then it kind of leaves less room for how like microaggressions traumatize people and how people react to microaggressions and how that also adds to an anxiety in a person. Yeah, that's all for me. It's a bit of a wayward thought.
Yeah, I totally understand. And I'm suspect when you say microaggressions, you're meaning racism, white supremacy. You're totally right. This book is at least what we read currently about white people. But take a look at this cover here. This is clearly a black figure, a black body in the center, and this could be by accident. This could be something else, but I see it as black people are the most, black and non-white people are the most affected by trauma because we are in a constant state of war, being dominated and mistreated by white supremacy. And unfortunately, we are the people who know the least about trauma and about this war being waged against us, which is called racism and white supremacy. So just because it's about white people currently doesn't mean there isn't tons to learn from it. Any more comments?
Yeah, I wanted to mention how trauma creates a pattern. And I wish I could draw from personal experiences, but the book is full of examples. But I'm really interested on getting to the parts where it talks about what if physiology does to the brain, because I know trauma creates like a vortex for people to experience similar forms of that trauma over and over again. So people find themselves, in similar situations where they're assaulted over and over again, or they'll constantly abuse drugs until they overdose over and over again. So I know trauma is a very moving, I guess, event, basically. So it's something that causes people to do things. So I'm really interested in how trauma forces people to live in like loops of infinite suffering.
I would say look no further than areas classified as ghettos, hoods, because many individuals trapped in those environments are in a circle of a cycle of trauma, whether that's being addicted to alcohol, drinking every day, smoking Newports every day, or whether that's getting in a car with a bunch of other Black people and going to shoot at other Black people. That is, these are the patterns that trauma creates. Which one of the few infinite manifestations that trauma creates. And very important that everyone here understands that this system of race and white supremacy every single day will produce tons and tons of trauma for most people on planet Earth. And until racism, white supremacy is replaced with a system of justice guaranteeing no one is allowed to be mistreated and those who need the most help receive constructive help, until this system is in place, trauma will be a huge part of our everyday lives. So it's very important to understand this topic and how to counter it. So we will not find ourselves attacking other Black people or subduing our feelings with poison like alcohol, at least consistently.
Yeah, I think too something that's interesting, sir, is I remember hearing someone talking about how, like, especially Black people kind of exist in a constant fight or flight mode because of racism. So it obviously, like, that leaves a lot of stress in your body throughout the day. But like, I think it's interesting because it makes a lot of sense in terms of the type of decisions people make and stuff. Because I know there's like fight or flight, and some people say there's like a freeze mode too, which makes a lot of sense too. Like, I think some people, whether it be like mentally, like just freeze and like do not, like when they're under attack, like they don't move or do anything. Because I know when I have anxiety, like that's what I do. And I think it's like learned patterns of behavior because like we're constantly feeling like we're under attack. And I think some other people, like, I think sometimes when people hold that stuff in too, it causes them to like lash out at random moments. I don't know. I don't know if I'm making sense, but yeah.
Yeah, I will say
And I
that.
would,
Go ahead, Ray.
oh, okay, thank you. Just to add to that, one of the things that stood out within this portion that I could really relate to is the idea of imagination. For all my life, like the only way I deal with trauma is just like work through it, you know? I'm okay with just like crying it out and getting through it and understanding the trauma and then being able to just like, well, I have to continue working and always being in this like state of busyness. And I think like one thing through like observation as well is just like, I feel like our society has like almost awarded those who can just like push through trauma, like, oh, just like dismiss it and move forward instead of like sitting with it and having time to understand it, like asking the question of, oh, why do I feel this way? Or even just asking the question of, what is this feeling? Like identifying a feeling that you have, whether it's just a simple like, I'm mad or I'm angry because this person hurt my feelings, or I am annoyed at this, or I feel sad because this happened, or that wasn't the response I got, you know? So I think it's just being able to talk through it and also not like continues like binging, like for example, I used to binge like TV shows for like hours. Like I kid you not, I would binge a show from like morning to night, like the whole day with nonstop and finish a whole season, just so I don't have to deal with whatever I'm mad about or upset about or whatever feelings that I had for that day. And it almost was like numbing because I could just like almost escape where I am and be in a position of like the characters and act like I'm in the movie, but I'm not really in the movie. And I'll just like watch it because it was so much better than just like sitting through my feelings. So yeah, I just wanted to add that. It stood out and I really wanted to, I feel like it's very important to think about those things that helps us escape and what do we use to escape from the reality or to cope with the trauma that we have, since we are in a constant war and we have been for decades, you know, since we're all born, we've been in a constant war. So it's like we all have some form of trauma. And it's just like, what have we used to cope with the trauma or get through the trauma? Have you went to therapy? Have you talked about it? Are you hiding from it? Is it too deep? So I think it's just important as we go through these parts and these chapters that we start thinking about and identifying our traumas and how we feel is best to get through it, or even ask someone too that you feel that you can confide in and get some help with that as well. Thank you.
Very well said, Nana. Wants me to go back to the group imagination, and I've concluded that if a bunch of people are doing the same things, thinking the same way, then that group imagination has to be very very limited. No one because no one is breaking out of the what has become the norm, and I see that in a lot of victims of white supremacy, whether they are brown, black, or yellow. Um, so yeah, or just another indication of how our imagination has been killed or has been retarded to the point where very few of us are attempting to do things that haven't been done before, like produce justice on planet Earth. Um, Also, reminded of what you said on y'all, the escape routes that many of us have to find because the trauma, white supremacy is just so unbearable. So there are many escape routes that we create, um, but we must, like you said, find escape routes that are constructive, that get the trauma out of our minds and bodies, so we're able to heal, actually heal from the trauma and not just um, being stimulated to shut out the trauma. So thanks for sharing, Aya.
One thing I'd like to add is the diagnosis and how it's termed. It's post-traumatic stress disorder. And the word post is very important, meaning that whatever actions are taking place that have caused the trauma are over. So it's really difficult when it comes to the misuse and abuse of people based on color under the system of racism, white supremacy, to even be diagnosed with a post-traumatic stress disorder while the system is still in place. So I want everybody to, if you would, if you have time, kind of think about that, because you'll get a lot of people. They've said it in the past. Some people are still saying it, talking about healing when it comes to racism, white supremacy, and you really have to think about that. I mean, when someone is in the act of being misused or abused, brutalized, that healing can't take place until after that mistreatment stops. As long as a system of racism, white supremacy exists, there's no way for non-white people to heal from being mistreated based on color. You have to get rid of the system first.
Mm.
And listening to the audio book, also like to add that that killing people is really an unnatural act. I mean, you never recover from that. So I've talked to a lot of people, including my father, who was in a war, who would never talk about the things that he did while he was there. He told me a few things, in the process of giving me what he called life lessons, things to look out for, watch this, watch that. But when it comes to, the act of actually taking somebody's life and how he actually did it, he never would talk about that. And I have other relatives that they never talk about that. They never talk about that for whatever reason, and I don't judge them on it, so that act, unless you're a killer. Now, see, there are some people that are just killers, and they, they love killing, and it doesn't affect them in the same way as it does most other people. So I just wanted to add that as well.
Thanks for that, Mr. Edwards. I believe the people who have made I believe the people who love killing the most are white supremacists, and I also believe that they are the ones who have trained the world to see killing as entertainment, fun, and as some sort of sport. So you're totally correct. And unfortunately, it could be so that the power of white supremacy has made killing enjoyable for victims of racism as well. Me in particular, growing up on just growing up in this system, white supremacy, I once, I saw on my Facebook today that I had wrote in 2009. My status was killing things, because I was once who thought killing was not a big deal, but that just goes to show to the to how we are made monsters. We are trained to think in such disturbing ways, because no, killing is not fun, and it's a very, very unnatural thing. But in a system of white supremacy, lots and lots of killing need to take place in order for the system to be maintained and refined. So the masters of killing is racist men and racist women, for sure.
And in addition to that, if I may, is that in the process of getting rid of the system, a lot of killing is going to have to take place. And I know a lot of people don't like to think about that, but it's going to have to take place.
Especially if the white supremacists decide on option 2, which is killing all of us, then yes, you're totally correct about that. Does anyone have any more comments, questions?
I think one of the biggest weapons that they use is, like how you say killing. I think a lot of people probably think of it as literal killing, but I think that killing us mentally is definitely the motivation. And where Regine mentioned about the TV, when she said the word binge, light bulb went off in my head, because I noticed I turn on the TV the other week. I don't turn on the TV that much, but when I turned it on to look for something, it said shows worth binging. That was the first day. So it's telling you that these shows are worth binging, and the shows that it tells you are worth binging are the most, I mean, in my opinion anyway, the stupid, the Kim Kardashian junk, and the stuff that you really shouldn't be, you shouldn't be binging anything. But if you're gonna binge something, make it be constructive. Don't, if it's something like this, you could binge it. But I can't think of any show that I would want to binge watch because it's so unproductive. And just thinking that there are actually people that take those suggestions, and I always thought, like, what is it with the Kardashians? But I guess the fact that they have money, and their lives look good on the screen, may act as an escape. I'm assuming. And so the killing, I feel like it's very easy for them to pass off that they're not doing anything to anybody, because it's just like when you're in a relationship with someone and they're like, I never hit you, so it's not abuse. They never actually took sometimes they don't actually take the gun physically, but the how do you say it? Those shows, the Cardi B, the Megan Thee Stallion, those types of people, that when they really want to get something done, I feel like people kind of just need to be on guard and aware, because they take the weapons. They take the weapons mentally, kind of like a lot of people are buying up weapons in the military, and so, people up high. But they're saying that the cyber attacks are the most threatening, because it's what a lot of people, I think the positive mental attitude that we live in a society that's very Christianity based, positive mental attitude. And I know specifically at work and in relationships, when things have been done that are like obviously wrong to me, sometimes I'll try to justify it because that programming comes back, that positive mental attitude. And the society, the system of white supremacy that we live in, actually takes the victim's complaint, most of the time, from what I can see, it makes them seem like a crazy person, to where you actually feel afraid to announce, like, I've been wronged, something has happened. A quick example of that is, I had a lot of fast food jobs, and that wasn't too fun. I didn't have a problem with the job, but of course the corporate culture of those jobs. And one of the jobs I worked with, one of my most difficult managers, I worked 40 hours a week. I worked graveyard, everything's super inconvenient. And one day, make a long story short, something happened that was totally inappropriate that I couldn't prove. Something was put into something that I was consuming, a drink that I was consuming when my back was turned. Because when I came back, my tongue started burning and I was scared to death. And immediately my mind went to, oh, I must have brushed my teeth before I came to work. This can't be what I think it is. Because if I say that, people are going to think I'm crazy. So when I asked the question about what happened, I said, did anyone, I didn't want to be, I couldn't process it. And I said, when I went to the back, did anyone accidentally spill something in my cup, like by accident? And oh, no. It was a weird, it wasn't just like, what do you mean? Like, it didn't seem like they were shocked by it. It was like, oh, no. Well, what is she talking about? And I could tell that something was up. But when that happened to me, I actually shut down. I guess, the fight or flight response, I shut down because it shocked me so badly. And I realized that, these things actually do happen more often than a lot of people would like to admit. And that admitting it is the first step to making things better, not to worry so much about the judgment from other people, because that's going to happen anyway. And to get out of that situation, not to get stuck. So I got stuck there, and I never thought about it for maybe, I'd say I've thought about it twice in a span of 8 years. And then I got injured at another job, and they didn't look at me properly. And all of these feelings started coming out, like I did all this work for these corporations, and these people mistreated me. And that thought just kept playing in my head over and over, but only when I was in pain. So like whenever my hip hurt from being injured at work, and this was a different job, but they're similar jobs, that would come back from like 8 years ago. That day that I went to work and trusted everybody, and then at the end of the day, I didn't trust anybody, but I felt ashamed. I felt ashamed that someone would do that to me. I actually started asking myself, like, what could I have done wrong to deserve that? Like, and what were they planning for me? And I couldn't face all those questions at the time. So I guess later, years down the line, when I thought I was over it, I was tough, I'll get past that, it started coming back. And like, every single day, those thoughts just took over my head and made it hard for me to think. So I think that that's one of the biggest weapons that they can tell you, oh, nobody wants to hurt you, nobody wants to do anything, don't think for yourself. And then later, when somebody actually does pull out a weapon, when it gets, you know, super serious, I feel like a lot of people kind of lay down and take it because they started with the mental, and I felt like the mental is building up to the physical, possible violent extermination of the person. So when things happen to people in the system of racism, white supremacy, I think it's very important to try and process it at the time and to try and act then instead of later, because you'll be on your toes, research, maybe you'll find a better place that you were, you know, meant for. Maybe you'll have enlightenment if you actually just accept the reality, let go of the, you know, the Christianity brainwash and the positive mental attitude, and just look at actions. Like, what is this person doing? What is this person saying? Are they a threat? And how can I protect myself? Because at the end of the day, everybody, I mean, of course, everybody's going to die. I mean, if someone wants someone to die, it's not that hard to do in this day and age. But the most important is that we're processing, recovering, and that we have a reason to live while we're here. Because at any time, anything that any of us do can become illegal under the system of racism, white supremacy. So because of that, they can have a reason to either make the quality of life, mentally kill the person, or physically kill the person if they don't decide to comply with the current system or even a new system that they might be incorporating with others, which that's a whole another conversation. But very important to have in my opinion, to have a reason to live. And I think that a lot of people think that they're alive, but they're really already dead. They're just a part of that program, and that program isn't a winning program. It's a dead program. If that's what living life is about, is being loyal to a program that creates all of this chaos, people need to look and ask themselves, like, what is my reason for living? Is it that TV show that they throw in front of my face to distract me? Is it this technology that I think I love that gives me anxiety? Is it I think that the reason why I want to live is to protect my son. That's my purpose. Because if I look around me, I don't really see valid reasons. But if I look at my offspring and my son, you know, I could see, well, this is hope. This is hope for a new future. I can put what I know and what I'm researching and what we do as a group and to combat the system of racism, white supremacy into him, and have that hope that this isn't just going to continue to be the same cycle if we have everybody together working toward a problem. And every problem has a solution. But one of the biggest problems that we face as a society that they have programmed into us is the fear of death, which will happen to everybody.
Thank you, Sandra. No one deserves to be mistreated, and people who think otherwise don't deserve to be on this planet. Is what I have to say about that. Very, very disturbing experience involving your prior workplace, but not surprising at all. Workplaces are to be mistreated, to be abused, misused, like Mr. Edwards was saying earlier, be used and abused. But it's very important to understand when it's happening to you and how to counter it effectively, which I'm glad you're getting closer to.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any more comments? Closing comments.
I agree with Sandra. What you were saying about always trying to like rationalize it when something happens to you, like intentionally. I think I do that a lot, and if it
Your mic is a little staticky.
Oh, hold on, let me see. You can let me fix.
Oh, actually, it wasn't you. I believe it was someone else. Someone else's mic.
Okay. Yeah, I was just gonna say that whenever I have experiences where like something kind of traumatic happens to me, I always try to like rationalize like, oh, like this, like that wasn't that person's intention, or it didn't really like affect me, or my reaction was overblown. And sometimes it's not until I tell someone else and they're like, no, that's really like that's really horrible, or you shouldn't have experienced that, then I'm like, oh. And I feel like it comes from just like years of undervaluing yourself and just feeling like it's not even like being naive. I literally think it's just like feeling like you're not worth better. So if that person did that, it's not a fault in them, it's a fault in you. And I think it comes from, personally for me, like how I was raised is like, it's never, oh, like you have an issue or there's something that you're doing that's not correct and let's figure out tools to like make things better. It's always just like a barrage of like, these are all the things that are horrible about you. I've done everything to help you and you're not good enough, you're not getting it. And so I think like so much of how we rationalize the things that happen to us come from the way that our parents treated slash mistreated us, because I think that's how we gauge a lot of our experiences. Like I know people like to joke like that people have daddy issues and stuff, but I think it's really real, because if a lot of your experiences or a lot of like how you respond to things viscerally is really implanted in you at a young age, then yeah, a lot of it comes from your interactions with your parents or your family, and that's the kind of mirror. So I notice as I get older, a lot of things that my parents do that I didn't want to do that I'm doing anyway, and it's like I have to literally like stop myself, and I have to like fight myself to not follow those same patterns. Yeah.
Yeah. And that is just the deepness that the brain trashing from white supremacy goes. I believe Sandra mentioned something about what did she do to deserve this, and I think that's an indication of like placing blame on herself and not racist man and racist woman. And that's another training we've been given. We've been trained to blame ourselves or other powerless non-white people, when the people who are to blame for this book club meeting taking place, for the trauma discussion taking place, and for the madness we all live in is racist man and racist woman. So that is something to also be understood, because yeah, they have trained all of us to be monsters and monstrosities. Neil Fuller Jr.
I think they do a really good job of making people feel stupid, inverted commas. And I think it's like super toxic. Some like that, instead the constant demonizing, instead of once again just being empathetic or open. And even empathy, I hate the way it's been used in the last few years because it just feels like even that is like almost a joke now. Like when you consider, for example, this man and his trauma and his family, like he's going around killing and raping people, and then going back to another human who's kind of like, yeah, sure, live your best life. Like I just feel like with white supremacy, it's just really good at somehow allowing a white man to be a white man. I mean, to be a menace, but and then anyone else is just kind of deemed unworthy or stupid for um, having a human reaction. And I think hopefully though with Black communities or communities outside white supremacy, there can be a focus on communal care. Because I think another thing is what gets to me sometimes is they isolate individuals and then they put the individual away, and then they act as if the individual is a product of their own environment, and then kind of completely dismissing the trauma either being because I think another thing with trauma is, like, for me at least, I feel like seeing white people is traumatic. And I think they kind of like never really point that out to us. Like, they kind of once again remove this from even understanding trauma, and I think that's really dangerous to us.
Well said, Leo. Does anyone have any more comments?
It reminds me of the saying, you could take the person out the hood, but you can't take the hood out the person. I feel like it's not even just trying to take the hood out the person. It's taking them out of an environment and seeing if the things that they learned from their previous environment will follow them, which most likely will always follow them because of the trauma you grew up with, the trauma that you experience. When not dealt with, it always is an experience that you're going to always kind of keep with you to adjust in life, because that's how people feel like when they're going through life. You have to, your trauma is kind of like you dealing with how you deal with things. That's how you cope with things. It's a cope mechanism. So I don't think it's as far as like them being the way they are, but just accepting the things that they experience. No matter where they go, you're gonna always go back to what you know as a defense mechanism, because you don't know how to deal with the traumas you've been dealing with.
Yeah, and I suspect the majority of non-whites have no clue that A, they're traumatized um, drastically, and B, how to counter it, or how to alleviate and get out of their cycles of trauma, patterns of abuse, addiction, whatsoever. And it's because, yeah, this is because this is a huge effort to keep us in a state that we are just to quote the code book, in a state where we're stupid and pitiful people who don't even want to know about trauma or the system of white supremacy. So until we understand what has exactly been done to us, meaning until we really understand racism and white supremacy, what it is and how it works, we're gonna just keep falling victim to racist man and racist woman and all of their tricks they have planned for us, whether it's drugs, alcohol, gangs, working terrible jobs, being mistreated and not knowing how to deal with that mistreatment. Whether it's any of those things or the infinite amount of things I didn't mention, they have a plan for us forever until this problem is solved. And I'm not a person who practices zero-ristic thinking, which is believing that the system can't be replaced with justice. So I'm certain that this system can be replaced in about 2 weeks if we have an effective numbers, people just really understanding the system and how to counter it.
I think something too that Leo was saying that was interesting was that, like, the Tom guy, you know, he is able to ascend to become a lawyer, to have like a wife and a family and to have a home. So I think it's really interesting because it's like he went through this really traumatic experience, but like also like under this system, he's still able to like exist in a state of like security that, like Miss Williams was saying, that like her partner didn't have, you know, her husband didn't have, like, because he didn't have his military benefits, you know what I mean? So I think it's like really interesting because, you know, we're supposed to have a lot of sympathy for Tom, which, okay, I have some sympathy, I guess, but like he also has like so many resources and has able to even just having like a home and access to like healthcare and all, or like access to time to even go to this like psychotherapist for this period of time is like a thing that so many Black people don't have. And so I think it's like really important that like we have to understand and not compare ourselves to white people, because they have so much more. Not just do they have like access to resources, but they can go to a war, you know, like commit all of these atrocities and then come back and become like a lawyer or something like that. And Black people come back from a war that they didn't even want to go to, and like, you know, are just left with like addiction and a lot of poverty. So I think also that's something that I don't know if this book is going to go into, but I think that whatever we exist in is always going to be 10 times worse, right? Because we have so much economic insecurity, like Sandra was talking about.
Yeah, well said, Ash. Thank you for that insight. Yep. It's very important to understand that white people, this system is designed for them so they can go to war, commit atrocities, and if they want to do the work to become so-called better, they can. But it's very, very hard for victims of racism to get help when they need help the most in a system of white supremacy.
Yes, I just wanted to comment on the reading. I wanted to, show an appreciation for the reading. For me, it was definitely a useful, constructive use of my time. I feel that it has definitely cleared up some confusion for me regarding, trauma. A lot of the things that I did know prior to this about trauma, I would say I wasn't as well informed, because I got most of my information from, places like social media, which is one of the reasons why I left that, that platform, just so I could get, a better understanding of, what's going on around me, and not just, hearing it from people that, may not understand it as well. The reading was, very good. It shed some light on, how I possibly deal with trauma, or even what I would consider to be trauma or a traumatic experience. There's a lot of things that I've come to realize that I have not dealt with because of said trauma. And even though I may walk around and act like everything's as well as it can be under a system of racism and white supremacy, there's a lot of things that I need to address and deal with. I thought one thing in particular about the book was, I was thinking, man, I know he must be talking about white people in this story, because I don't think anything has been done to really address the trauma regarding racism that that Black soldiers had to go through. Like Miss Williams was saying, her husband, or her ex-husband experienced some things that I suspect was due to racism. But I don't know if those white soldiers experienced something similar. Everybody definitely was experiencing traumatic experiences. So I wanted to add that everything that's been said has been really good. I've been listening in, trying to get all my thoughts together. Well, yeah. But I do suspect, as far as it goes towards, creating something about racism, I think it's, I understand that everything that we as non-white people do is, a reaction to racism. And I appreciate this book, because at least it seems like, the white people are getting together to, develop something and develop a better understanding of trauma. I guess me, myself, I would just have to, observe it through, the lens of racism and apply it. That's all I wanted to say.
Thanks for sharing, Kwaku. Yeah, this has also been a very constructive use of my time as well. Has anyone, should we get into closing comments or?
Yeah, I definitely wanted to add, I don't know if anyone's heard of maybe you guys have discussed it already, Drapetomania. So it's they came up with it, a mental illness where slaves try to run away. And I find in the context of this, it's very interesting that they would, so basically it's based off the urge to run away from their white slave master, and they literally made that an illness in the 19th century. And I think it's, quite insane, once again, how they treat our traumatic responses as insane. And I think that's really maybe, sorry, I laugh, that's how I also deal with my trauma. But I think that for me is like how do I explain a thing that I think might be worth mentioning in this room, which is they did have though in the 19th century, us trying to escape slavery was an illness, and they saw that as something to pigeonhole, to control us with. So I think it kind of adds more context, like this man went and killed people and la la la, whereas we can't even try to escape them without being insane. And I think that's really maybe useful for someone.
Yeah, he's very telling of the system of white supremacy. White people are powerful. If they want to create a illness for Black people, they can go ahead and do that. If they want to change the definition of things, they could go ahead and do that. Which is why it's very important for Black people to have their own definitions and have an understanding of the system in their own way. But we don't have to use white people's. We have to use their words because we all speak their language, but we can produce our own meanings, like the definition of justice, guaranteeing no one is allowed to be mistreated, and those who need the most help receive constructive help. That's not in a dictionary, but that's the definition that Neely Fuller has created. So the power of words and power of definitions is something we have to begin to understand and to begin to grasp and use for ourselves. Thanks for that tablet, Miss Leo. Does anyone have any more comments? Okay, I think we could get into closing comments. I'll start. I do I want to talk about imagination because I'm reminded of myself. And when I was very much younger, I was just filled with imagination. I would like draw comics a lot. I would write stories a lot in my when I was a child. But as I experienced more and more trauma, that that imagination, that creative spirit, slowly but surely was being killed and thwarted. Um, but this is what happens in the system of white supremacy. I'm sure every Black vessel is born a very, very brilliant being, capable of anything, full of potential. But the system immediately destroys that in all 9 areas of people activity: um, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. All those 9 areas we are destroyed spiritually and mentally. And if they'd have their way physically as well. So I'm very, very grateful and that I have adjusted to white supremacy enough to like still be somewhat creative and do what I want to do, finish my book, write my book. But this system is really tragic, and it's our job, not white people's job, to understand it and solve the problem. That's all for me.
After hearing this, I really started to think about when the comment I believe that Ash just mentioned about the comparison of people fighting the war, say getting involved in gangs and the military war. it's interesting that she said that, because what I was reading also reminded me a lot, when I detoxed from, like, I used social media less. I stopped cable for a month because I didn't have money, and I felt like that was one of the traps that they used to keep me into poverty, is to make me think that I need to pay for cable to be some sort of good parent. I know people would make comments to me at work like that would imply that I was a bad mother because I didn't have cable. And I would tell them, no, when you have cable, if you're not watching your kids with the cable, there's things that they're getting programmed that say they're rated G, and these things are far from rated G. That's just a label that they throw on there to try and get basically to try and get your children indoctrinated. So I think it's interesting that when I detox from TV and all that, one of my first thoughts I wrote down on a piece of paper, and this is what started me researching all of this stuff, was that the people that fought the war in the ghetto were going to a war that they did not sign up for. And what they get out of it, I noticed, is shame, called low life, loser, criminal record, anything imaginable. But when these other military people go to the war, professionally under the name of, our system that we live under, white supremacy, that they're praised, they're heroes, they're people who they deserve, not all of them, of course, are praised this way, but they're praised in a better sense than the people who had to go to the war that they didn't want to fight. And the main thing that is, as children, that the idea, if you send a child to war, if you touch a child, if you do any crazy stuff like that, this is almost guaranteed to mess them up forever. So I think that the similarities between the two is a very important starting point of realizing, hey, there's something wrong with my environment. Things don't seem right. Personally, from my personal experience, and everyone's may be different, but of course, being poor myself, I came into contact with more of the people that fought in the war that they weren't volunteering to fight as children, than the people who had the choice of going to war or not. And when I got to know these people, I started to notice that most of the people that weren't assigned to go to the war seemed to have a more genuine character than a lot of the people that chose to go to the war. So it made me think of things in a different perspective. And then it made me start asking, like, well, are these people being sent to war? Because if their character overall seems to be better, and like, we can't use, well, somebody is going to steal some food from the store because they're hungry and their parents can't afford food for them. We can't use things like that to determine character. That there's plenty for everybody. People are just stingy with it. Character is how you treat other people, how you treat your coworkers when you come to work, how you treat everybody equally, even down to trying to change your life, making a conscious effort. Even if you're failing, if you're making a conscious effort constantly to change your life. And I see that the people that are being told that they are doing that aren't really doing that. They're just getting grandfathered into the system of white supremacy. That definitely opens up my mind to research more of this. So this book definitely validated a lot of the inconsistencies that I feel like that goes over a lot of people's heads, just because the brainwashing is just so heavy. Because these thoughts only came to me when I talks from the TV and the social media. I never had it when I was watching TV. I wasn't really watching it a lot, but it was more social media, to be honest. When I was on social media, more actions, I always was judging people. I noticed that I was always judging people. I was always thinking that, well, I made better decisions than this person, or at least I'm not. And people were validating that, like, yeah, if ever I said that I had anxiety or depression, oh, you shouldn't be depressed. At least you're not a heroin addict. Like there was always like some kind of comparison or like that's worse than that. And I think that it's very important when we're doing reading, and we'll notice that if we detox from these channels that they want us to use to distract us, that our thoughts will start to make more sense, and that the need to judge other people just melts away, and we're able to be constructive when we're not watching their what 0526 refers to as brain trash. When we're not trashing our brains, there is we have our full potential out there. We can see things for what they are, because there's nothing coming in front of our face that's trying to, oh, well, you need to hate this person, you need to hate that person. Just observe people on how they behave and not judge them by their past or because the thing is with the system of racism, white supremacy, that I've noticed common, especially with all these readings, is that these people do all that same stuff too that they shame these people for, sometimes worse. And all of this is just okay. The connection with the lawyer, the fact that you can do all this dirt, but if you're rich and if you're white, it's easy just to sweep it under the rug. Or if you're an athlete or somebody that the white supremacists see that can make money for them, then also the morals get excused. So if we're comparing morals, of course the people that have more money to cover up what they're doing, the morals are going to be low if they are low moral people to begin with, and you put money in their hand. So the last closing thought that I have is at the beginning of the conversation, I noticed that we're talking about the jealousy that's been projected onto non-white people, which I've always been told that money is the root of all evil. I've heard that ever since I was probably like 5. And money came after jealousy. Money is man-made. I mean, this is what it seems like from what I've researched, heard, conversations, is that jealousy is the root of evil, and money is just something that they use to cover that up and act like, oh no, I'm fine, I'm good, look at me, I got this big house and life is great for me. But the reality is that if we can't fix our emotions, our jealousy, our hatred towards some people's hatred toward other people, then there is money can't be the root of all evil, because money is a man-made item. So I think that these concepts are things that society kind of gets stuck on, that the chase for the money. They think that it's just about the money, or they grow up in these situations and think, well, now I want to roll around in a Mercedes because I ain't ever had a car when I was young, or now I want to have this big house that's just way too big for me to live in because I lived in the projects as a kid. I think it's more important to direct, like, well, why did all this happen? Somebody and their feelings and jealousy and feelings that, I mean, what does that do? It causes more chaos. So I think it's very very enlightening. It definitely is another piece to the puzzle, and I look forward to continuing to see more productive pieces as this puzzle as time goes on. And that's it for my closing comment.
Thank you, Sandra. I just have to add, the root of all evil is the white people who maintain, refine, and practice white supremacy. Any more closing comments?
The expert that I got from this book is trauma, always causes changes in your life. And it just made me resurface all the trauma that I have in my life and why I am the person I am. It just creates a space of the deep-rooted issues we have as a system and as non-white people, that the problem that we have is bigger than we expect it to be. And we have a lot of work to do, but it's good to face your trauma so at least you know why you programmed to be this way, why are things the way it is, and why you react the way you act. So I just want to hear more. Um, I know that I've been talking about therapy for a while, but not just for me. I know my child's father went to therapy before, and he's just thinking about doing it again. But it's just best to deal with your trauma, and especially if you're in a situation with somebody, because when you don't deal with your own trauma, you start to bleed on other people. And you don't want to be that person to bleed on other people because of the trauma you choose to put away or to pin on other people. So that's my closing comment.
Yeah, I just want to quickly say I'm excited to get through more of the book, and I'm a firm believer of all of this pain and suffering is one of the consequences of racism, white supremacy. And we all know the saying, hurt people, hurt people. That can be translated as traumatic people. People who are traumatized carry trauma, and they're going to spread that to as many people as they can through their learned patterns of behavior that bring up experiences where people are often hurt and manipulated or experience negative experiences. So I'm really excited to learn more. But I feel like the first chapters where was definitely was centered on the white consciousness, because I totally agree with Edward, the gentleman who said killing is unnatural. I had a conversation with someone not that long ago, and it was with a white female and a black female, and the white female and the black female were I guess they're best friends, and they were arguing with me saying that people and I just care about it, and I was like, it's impossible to murder someone and not feel it on your brain as a negative effect. You know, there's no way to just be a gangster and be killing people and be proud of it. It's impossible. To do that is to be sociopathic and unwell, you know, and be in a constant state of negativity. So what they're saying is like not possible. But yeah, I'm gonna stop there. But yeah.
Yeah, the only way to not be affected by killing is to be some sort of psychopath or sociopath. I agree. Anyone else? Closing comments? Final regards? Final remarks?
My closing comments is that I'm excited to read the rest of the book, and I thought that it was a pretty interesting bit so far.
I would love to add that to to also maybe take this as an opportunity to continue to look at ways of how we deal with our own trauma, and what methods we use. Like I know he said psychotherapy and meditation or something, but I feel like it's good to also stay curious about what healthy methods are manifesting or are out there or that we're already utilizing, and to also recenter them when having heavy conversations like this.
Alrighty. Thank you everyone for a really powerful discussion. Again, this is not an easy topic to learn about or discuss, but in a system of white supremacy, we will not be doing a lot of easy things because that's not how the situation is set up for us. So I appreciate everyone being here and looking forward to seeing everyone at 10 a.m. next week.